So Rome was a republic, and a republic basically means that it has representative government, as a representative government, where it has people that represent the masses or all the citizens. Very similar to what we have. Well, during this time, around the very end of the BC era, around 100 BC, there was a strong military leader. His name was Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar became very popular amongst the people. He was a strong military leader. He had conquered territories that Rome had never been able to touch. He conquered areas such as Gaul, which is currently today France. He conquered southern Britain and a few other territories. He became popular amongst the people. People loved him. They adored him. He was also part of the Senate. And when Julius Caesar came back to Rome after his conquering of Gaul, he found that the Senate was not getting along. They were very dysfunctional. And so Julius stepped in and declared himself dictator for life. Dictator for life in 45 BC. He basically declared himself the emperor of Rome. And the people supported it because they loved him and they wanted things to get done. The problem is that the Senate didn't support this, because if he is the dictator, then it takes away from the Senate's power. So the Senate conjured up a plan to assassinate Julius. Julius had a best friend. His name was Brutus. Brutus was part of the Senate. He served on the Senate with Julius. They grew up together. They were in the military together. One night, Brutus invites Julius to the Senate floor for a celebration of sorts. Julius accepts, and he goes to the Senate floor where they're all hanging out, congregating, talking, just as senators do. And suddenly, everything got quiet. And Julius was kind of stunned by this. And the senators start all looking at Julius. And Julius suddenly notices this. And suddenly Julius notices that the senators, many of them have knives in their hands. And so Julius backs up, and looking in the crowd, he was looking for his friend Brutus. Surely Brutus, of all the senators, would back him up. And he sees Brutus. He finally sees Brutus looking at him as they're staring back and forth at each other. And Brutus is there with a knife in his hand. And Julius says to him, "Et tu, Brute? Et tu, Brute," meaning you too, Brutus? You too will kill your friend Julius? And as William Shakespeare writes, Brutus dives in, followed by many other senators, and they stab Julius to death. His assassination took place on the Ides of March, or March 15th, 44 BC. And Julius was dead. And the Senate retook control. Kind of. So once Julius is dead, the senators try to retake control of Rome. But there's still chaos. The people don't trust the Senate. The Senate is slow to get things done. And slowly, Rome kind of reverts back into this chaotic state. Julius' death was tragic, and the people were saddened. But Julius would get revenge, even in his death. He would get revenge through the eyes of a child. That child's name is Octavian Augustus. But he wasn't known as Augustus yet. He was only known as Octavius, and he was the nephew of Julius Caesar, and would later be known as the adopted son of Julius. We'll talk about him in a second. Just to recap, the Roman government was made up of the Senate. The Senate was supported by the people. But as the Senate was starting to fail, the people looked towards a new leadership. They looked to Julius Caesar, whom they loved and adored. Once Julius Caesar declared himself dictator for life, the Senate lost power. To regain power, the Senate killed Julius Caesar. So what happened after Caesar's death? After Caesar's death, the Senate remained in power. But leadership would be taken over by two people: Julius Caesar's adopted son, Octavius, and a man named Mark Antony, who was great friends with Julius Caesar as well. Mark Antony had a relationship with a woman. Her name was Cleopatra. Cleopatra was the mistress of Julius Caesar at one point in time. And later, Cleopatra would set her eyes on the newest leader of Rome, Mark Antony. And he fell for her hook, line, and sinker. They fell in love. They had kids. Cleopatra was the pharaoh of Egypt, one of the last pharaohs. Mark Antony joined her in leadership and gave away Roman territory to their children. But the Senate didn't agree with this. The Senate was confused by this. He had no right to give away Roman territory to their children. And as a result, Octavian Augustus declared war against Mark Antony. This is the one part I didn't tell you yet, is in addition to Mark Antony declaring a relationship with Cleopatra, Mark Antony was actually married to a Roman woman. That Roman woman was Octavian Augustus's sister. Yep. So you can imagine Augustus, or Octavius, as he was known as, was ready to get revenge for his sister and the betrayal of Mark Antony. Augustus declared war against Cleopatra and Mark Antony, and thus took place one of the greatest battles in Roman history. Octavian Augustus defeated Mark Antony. Cleopatra, she died before they could actually get to her. Legend says that she died by being bitten by an asp. An asp with a P. Come on, guys. It's a snake. It's a very poisonous snake, and Cleopatra allowed the snake to bite her, to poison her, and kill her before the Romans could get to her and do something horrible to her like crucifixion, which was a very common way of killing enemies of the state and anybody who was a criminal. Once Augustus defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra, he returned to Rome as a hero. People loved him. People adored him. People wanted to be him. Sound familiar? Kind of like his uncle Julius. But Octavius learned from his uncle's mistake. Power's good, but power too fast, too quick, too sudden will get you killed. In case you're wondering what they look like, here's Mark Antony and here's Cleopatra.